As a hunter that spends a lot of time spotting stalking in some pretty nasty conditions, one thing that I'm always concerned about is making sure that my barrel is always clean. I don't have any obstructions down it. Because we're hunting in some mud, wind, a lot of gravel many times, what I worry about is something getting in my barrel and obstructing the barrel. So a little tip I've got for you, take some electrical tape and just tape up the end of your muzzle like this. By doing so, what you've done, you've protected it from any kind of debris from getting inside whatsoever. And that way you know that when you take your shot, your barrel is going to be nice and clean and it doesn't affect accuracy, not one bit. In order to become a better marksman, you need to learn how to squeeze a trigger. You know, it sounds like it's pretty elementary, but it's true. People have a hard time practicing squeezing the trigger. And what I mean by that is that a lot of folks jerk the trigger. They'll wind up get the target in their crosshairs and then they jerk the trigger. And that is not the right technique. What you want to do is you want to actually, when you put your finger on the trigger, talk to your finger. Focus on exactly what you're doing. You're going to have wobble across your target. I mean, the crosshair is going to go back and forth across it, even if it's this much. And some people will want to time it to where they time it, try to, well, by the time my gun goes off, the crosshairs will go across the center of the target. The way that you practice to become a better shot is squeezing the trigger, but what you want to do is you want to minimize your wobble back and forth. Minimize it where it'll start out with a wobble this big and maybe this big, and pretty soon the wobble gets this big. Focus, 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 and focus on squeezing the trigger, and it'll make you a better shot. If you've ever had a problem finding your target downrange when you throw your rifle up to your shoulder, odds are you have your scope power turned way too high. What I recommend is turning your scope power all the way down. It will increase your field of view. Many times, just because a scope has a variable power, most people want to see better, so they crank it all the way up, and they have extreme difficulty finding the target once they look through the scope. So turn your power down on your scope. It'll help you with a greater field of view. And at the same time, too, you may want to just practice pointing and aiming. Pointing and aiming. Think about this. If somebody was to ask you with your finger to point at a clock or point at a table or point at the camera, you don't have to sight down your finger. I'm pointing at the camera right now. It's just that you're so used to pointing exactly where you're looking at with your finger. That's the way it ought to be with a rifle. That's what I like to do a lot of times to make sure the rifle is unloaded, action open. I take my scope, turn it all the way down, and I point and I'm on target. I point and I'm on target. And it's amazing how much you will increase your field of view by turning the power of your scope down. One of the easiest ways to become a better shot is to realize that if you have a 3-point rest for your body, you're going to be more stable. And what I'm talking about is that you've got one rest here on the forend, you've got one underneath the stock, and then have one underneath your shooting elbow. If you're a right-handed person like me, I want to have my right arm supported. If I was left-handed, this bench is actually set up. I could come over here on this side, so my left arm is actually supported. I'm talking about a 3-point setup here. If you've ever shot off of a bipod, you've got 2 sticks out in front of you, and then it's just not real stable. But if you shoot off a tripod, you've got 3 legs holding and it's more stable. So what we're talking about here is really a 3-point system for shooting. As you'll notice, I've got a nice stable system right here. I've got a bag up front and a bag back here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to load my rifle and I'm going to take aim, and you'll notice where my elbow is. Okay, and I'm talking about my right elbow. What my right elbow does is it actually rests and it supports my body wobble back and forth. You'll also notice the way my left arm is up on the table as well. I'm up snugly behind the rifle. I've got a good solid rest. I'm going to just squeeze it off. That's perfect. Absolutely perfect. You will shoot a lot better consistently over and over again. Make sure you're wearing good ears, good eye protection, and make sure you're looking for that good rest. I like to call it a 3-point rest. We're going to see how this rifle likes this new ammunition. It's important that every time you change ammunitions, check your zero to make sure that it's shooting in the same place you want it to. Now, this tip I'm going to give you will help you be able to get your rifle zeroed in with as few shots as possible. What we're going to do, we've got a target at 100 yards. We're going to go ahead and we're going to take one shot. I've got a nice rest. It's really, really important in this situation to have a nice firm rest that you're shooting from. Don't do it off of something you're going to wobble. You want a nice firm rest. We're going to go ahead and take a shot right now and see where it's shooting. All right, always make sure and have ears on and eye protection. Let's see what happens. All right, taking a look through the scope, I can actually see that shot is low right. It's about at 415. Here's the important stuff. This is how you're going to be able to get it zeroed real quick. All right, what we're going to do, we're going to eject that cartridge. And we're going to look through the scope. What we want to do at this point, you've noticed I've taken the scope caps off the vertical and horizontal adjustments. And I'm going to take the scope, I'm going to zero it right on the center of the target. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the turrets until they line up with the bullet hole right there. Now what I did was turn the adjustments on the scope to where from the absolute dead center of the target, I just moved them over to the bullet hole is all I did. Now what I'm going to do is take another cartridge, I'm going to put it in, take a shot and see what happens. Very nice. Okay, the key to this is as you make the adjustment, you want to have it on a bag like this, a good solid rest, so it doesn't move. You've got to have the good solid rest when you're making the adjustments without moving the rifle at all to make sure that you're moving the crosshairs from the dead center of the target to the dead center of the first bullet hole. When you do that, you're adjusting, you're aligning everything up. We're going to take one more shot here and see what happens. Very, very nice. There's a lot of misinformation out there about exploding rifle targets. I'm going to tell you how they work. First off, they come in two different components. Take the mixing container that comes in the package and pour both components inside the mixing container and shake it up vigorously until you have a uniform color. Once you have a uniform color, pour it back in the original container. And this right here is what the target is going to look like. The only way that this can explode is if it is detonated with a high-powered rifle. It can't explode with, you can't take a match and light this, and you can't explode it with a hammer. The only way that this exploding rifle target will explode is with a well-placed shot off a center-fired rifle. Now I already have one of these targets downrange. We're going to go ahead and take a shot, and I'll show you what they look like. Make sure and have good hearing protection and wear it. Make sure and have good eye protection and use it. And be a safe distance from the target. Woo, hoo, hoo, hoo. Shooting exploding rifle targets can be a lot of fun, but always make sure and have good hearing protection, your eye protection, and be a safe distance away from your target. If you're an archer, odds are you're shooting carbon arrows. The amount of energy that is created and transferred from a compound or crossbow into the shaft of a carbon arrow is tremendous. If your carbon arrow is damaged, it can cause you damage. There's a warning right on the arrow. Always inspect every arrow to make sure that there are no nicks, cracks, or imperfections in any way. And the reason why is because the amount of energy that is transferred when you release a carbon arrow is transferred directly into the shaft. If there is a nick or an imperfection, it could snap that shaft, causing serious bodily harm. I'm Keith Waring for OpticsPlanet.com.